The VC Project.
No,
It
doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, but it's a fact. Like it's
not possible.
It's a Mayo Clinic certified statistic
What is?
that you're.
Hold on. Careful, because he goes rolling. So if you're going to throw any type of scientific information, there's a chance it lands on the internet forever, no matter if it's 59,999 miles off.
No one's going to call you out on it.
The human circulatory system is 60,000 miles long.
Oh, I've heard that.
Yeah, so the equivalent of going around the Earth twice.
So I think I saw a stat like that down at the Riverfront Museum because they have that Body World exhibit going on right now that's got all. Have you been down to that? Because they're closing that soon. Did you go when we had the trade show? I think they had it open then. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, you're right. I'm always rolling.
See,
so
that's why you got to watch out for this guy.
Welcome, President of Pearl Technology and our CISO. Is that how you say it correctly? I'm not an IT nerd.
CISO. I don't even know.
All right.
This is going to be our hardest hardest interview yet. Peeling back this onion is not easy to do. To get him to reveal any type of secrets or good stories, it's going to be our biggest challenge.
I think we'll be all right. We've been fortunate enough that our show prep has been very limited because we've got great guests on that we all know, and we know the product lines, we know everything else. So wanted to talk today about cybersecurity. We can talk a little bit about the other stuff that Pearl does. We can touch on that. I really want to talk about cybersecurity, how it relates to AV, kind of how we're taking an approach that most companies are not doing because most AV companies out there don't have that division of the company that we have, right? Doing cybersecurity and stuff, which is kind of cool. So, but to start, let's get a little bit of background and history on you.
All right. So, big part from a cybersecurity standpoint is I joined the Air National Guard when I was 18. Coincidentally enough, to pay for my college. Jeremy and I were just talking about paying for college. And I joined, it was my hobby, doing computers, right? So I went to boot camp, which was a rude awakening for me. And then I went to my technical school for my AFSC to learn my job. I got to Keesler Air Force Base on 9/11. So we honestly didn't know it was a real event. We thought it was like an exercise. They pulled out the TVs and we saw the planes hit the towers, right? So that changed what was my hobby and pretty much turned it into my passion, my duty, my service. So I've been plugged in doing cybersecurity since 9/11, 2001, every single day.
So how many months in were you when that happened?
A month and a half.
And you mentioned boot camp and the challenges that came with that. Most of us will never know what that entails. What was the hardest part about that?
Well, Air Force boot camp gets a lot of jokes, so if there's any Marines listening, they'll make fun of it. But for me as a computer nerd, just getting up in the morning and getting after it, doing PT in the morning and, just
PT, got it.
Little PT.
What's PT?
Physical training.
There you go.
And, pretty much just learning how to organize and do things in a meticulous manner because you might be working on a multi-million-dollar aircraft, right? So what looks like dust in your room might be a bigger deal. So it's attention to detail, and you couldn't do anything right. So you're learning that lesson too. So overall, great experience. I am a commander of cyber operations. I'm a communication squadron commander. Came up through the ranks. I was prior enlisted, and then now I've been commissioned for 12 years.
And before we get too far, into the weeds of the cybersecurity, talk a little bit about your experience deployed outside of this country and give us an idea what you've been through there.
So during the deployment, I had been in for quite a long time, so I was well trained for the deployment, but we did cyber operations and in activation where that is, I can't really say too much about where I was or what I was doing, but I've also been activated twice by the governor to do security for defense of our election systems. So two pretty big activations there, but the deployment was an experience just to be away from home, see how other people are living, see the securities and freedoms that we have in the United States that not everybody else has. That's probably the biggest awakening for me, just how well and great we have it in the United States.
I've deployed you several times too on my elderly parents when they've clicked on things they shouldn't be clicking.
Yeah.
So thanks for being the go-to on that as well.
Yeah.
I too have failed many click tests at the company. So
Thursday night about 8:30, say Anthony, my dad's up to his normal stuff again. What do we need to do here?
I don't click on anything anymore thanks to this guy. I don't trust anyone or anything ever when it comes to clicking or scanning of codes and that kind of jazz.
I got a good one this morning on my personal Gmail account. It was my name. It looked like it was from P. Venditte. But if you look into it, it was P.J. Venditte at the
It's
Gmail
all in the
address.
details.
And I would have 100% clicked right on that had I not been tuned into all the things that you teach about and the things that our cyber department, works on to make sure with the user awareness training and whatnot. I would have for sure clicked on that.
It's a good catch.
My dad actually got a phone call from somebody who said, "Hey, I need to log into your computer to correct something. This is this text word." Let them, they walked him through clicking on a link, downloading this software. I knew this before I even worked here. So I freaked out at him. I just bought him a new computer. It's like time for an upgrade anyways. You're getting rid of this hunk of junk.
Until the media started covering it as much as they did, though, somebody calls you with a question like that, you just assume, we're all right. That's fine. They're working from the tech side.
Well,
people are aware.
You get these. I mean, the hacking stuff only started happening. I mean, it's always happened for for as long as you can remember, but it really became serious. What would you say? 10 years ago, maybe a little less.
10 years, but then even in the last 3 or 4 years with ransomware and work from home, there's a lot more people that are vulnerable and a lot of money to be made.
What would you say was the first major hack in the United States that got the most attention and brought this to the forefront of everybody's mind? I think I know what it is because I watched a Netflix documentary on it, but I want to know if it's the same thing.
For residential consumer?
Yeah, for consumers, for your average consumer.
Yeah,
what
media speaking,
what brought it to the forefront?
General awareness.
Yeah, I want to say it's like the I love you bug or whatever the name of that email was, but it was an email that people clicked on and it circulated around the internet in minutes, right? But StuckNet is kind of the most popular one that you might see in a documentary where there was a hack on a nuclear power plant, and that kind of got the most.
See, my head was somewhere else. I was going with the Ashley Madison hack because that was the documentary I just watched, which was unbelievable.
Tale of two minds operating here.
So in the military, you're still serving.
Still serving.
How much longer are you in for right now?
I think Pat can appreciate. I got a little bit of Brett Favre in me, where it's just like one more season, one more season.
All right,
can't let it go.
Yeah, I've been doing it longer than I haven't. So I went in at 17, 18, and then I've been doing it 23.
Now the president of Pearl Technology. You and I work very closely together every day. I'm starting to get more involved with the other departments and just kind of out of the AV world. But I know that one of the discussions you and I have been having primarily has been to discuss the unsecured world of AV, right? Because a lot of the audiovisual equipment that we have, darn near all of the audiovisual equipment that we have now is on the network, and no one is securing it, right? And we were just as guilty of this before we came on board as a part of Pearl Technology. And so you and I have been making some giant strides to start doing that, right? And I don't think in our industry, there's not a lot of people that are looking at this. What's some of the stuff that stuck out to you when you first started having conversations with us about, that I would have explained something to you and you just shook your head and was like, dear God, what are these guys doing? Right.
Probably the biggest thing I noticed with AV that I see in a lot of other what we call operational technologies, whether it's like an HVAC system or a security camera system, anything that was previously analog and then now has gone digital and then now it rides over the IP space of most IT companies' networks, is the fact that a lot of these systems were not built with any type of security in mind. Really just make sure it works, right? And that's a hard enough job in IT, in AV.
Well, like the Target hack that everybody talked about a couple of years ago was through a thermostat or something, right? So it's AV, it's thermostats, like you said, it's anything.
Yeah, HVAC system. Because as they connect it to the IP network to gain scalability and everything you're doing as you're converging onto the switches, is that it's an entry now into the corporate network. So it's a target. A lot of these systems don't get patched. I mean, you're not getting a lot of AV upgrades coming out every month like your iPhone, right? I mean, you're not seeing these types of patches. They're just as vulnerable. Any amount of code has vulnerabilities in it. So the biggest thing we're noticing is that they just were not built with security in mind. You don't turn on an AV product and then get two-factor authentication requests to your cell phone. It's just not a consideration. But as it converges onto the IP space, it needs that same security.
We find that we're still, some of our larger corporate clients, our AV equipment is residing on an isolated network, right, where it's not ever touching the outside world. The only thing that touches the outside world is the user's laptop so that they can make their Zoom calls, team calls, whatever it is. But the AV gear itself is not. Makes it difficult for us who want to be able to service these systems, because we do offer services where essentially you can log in remotely and we can diagnose a problem that the client has. So, for example, classroom goes down, instructor can't figure something out, the director of IT, their tier 1 support is tried to troubleshoot it a little bit. Now they call us. We want to be able to remote into that system, bring up the touch panel, try and diagnose what's potentially wrong before we go and roll a truck out. So there's a lot of cost savings for us there, but there's a lot of risk there because it's a cloud-based management software that's allowing us into someone else's equipment, right? There's devices with dual network cards on them, which you absolutely hate, and I know that. And sometimes one NIC resides on the AV network and one resides for the cloud-based management software. And as long as you're working with the IT department, we can kind of isolate that traffic, if you will, right? But it's still a big security risk, especially when we start talking about remoting in any way for anybody. So, I mean, beyond that, I'm noticing that there was a lot of default passwords used in everything, right? That's a big thing. I know that I was guilty of, before coming on board at Pearl here, using the same password for every single website, from my banks to my email to everything else. Now I couldn't tell you a single password that I have for any of my things because I use a password manager, right? I know one password and that's it. And you guys make me change it like every 6 months. So, but that's actually really, no one's getting into my stuff. Like, at least I feel that way sometimes, right?
I don't say no one, but yeah, all music to my ears.
Yeah. But even our AV gear, right? There's a lot of times where I'll be on a job site and I'm trying to connect to a piece of gear and I will literally Google, what is the default login for this piece of equipment? And it pops right up on Google and I put it in and boom, I'm in the system, right? Now I can make my changes. But that's our older systems, because now our newer systems were password protecting all this stuff and using shared, and we're trying to get more into that there. Talk a little bit about the importance of that and kind of how that entails. I know you were talking about people hacking in through these other devices. I don't know, touch on all of that a little bit more.
I think the biggest shift I noticed is that from the work from home transition with COVID, there was a need for converging that isolated network, the AV teleconference, to now talk to the outside. People are doing Teams calls and everything. So now that AV is talking to the outside. That opened up some doors. And then secondly, a lot of people want to manage things remotely. So if there's no one in your building, the only way to access it from home is to open up some ports. So yeah, dual NICs, VLANs, all these buzzwords are all gold mines for hackers to get in and what we call pivot and escalate privileges. That's when we move into one environment, transition to the other. A lot of people give credit to VLANs, and that is a network segmentation tool, but VLAN hopping makes it really easy to go from one to the other. Now it limits the sophistication of people coming after you. So it does help. I'm not saying it's not a good security practice. It's just not an end-all be-all. So passwords, I've noticed when I did some research in audiovisual, a lot of equipments actually had built-in passwords into the equipment. That was a pretty standard operated procedure. I think they're getting better at it. I've seen some write-ups about how they're trying not to do that as much anymore, but I found it in a lot of AV equipment.
I've been finding that I was working with a piece of gear yesterday. I couldn't get into the web browser of it, and I, finally Googled it. Turns out it's not admin and password, right? Which is a lot of the stuff that we had, but it was username is admin, password is the serial number on the back of the device. I was like, oh, okay, that's a slightly more secure way to do that. I just flipped the device over, entered in boom, I was in, right? So I have to physically be there, like, to see it, which worked well. And I was like, I'm actually not going to change that. I'm just going to leave it as is, because I think that's a great way to do that. So some of our remote management software is using two-factor authentication now, which is nice. Our digital signage software does that. And we're forcing, our clients to use that. Even just our own softwares that we use for estimation and proposal writing and stuff, we force the two-factor authentication and all that stuff now, which is really nice. So, yeah, I mean, Pat, you were involved with selling a little bit of this stuff when you first started, before you got more into AV. Like, what were some of the challenges that you were finding when you were just trying to talk to people about security?
Nobody thinks that they're going to be the one to click on the link. Everybody thinks, I'm going to be aware, I'm going to be alert.
Those are the people who always click on the link.
I'm one of those people, and I have failed those phishing tests that luckily we do within the company several times to kind of get that ego out of the way. And like anything, until it affects you directly, you don't want to deal with it. Out of sight, out of mind. So what I was finding was people were being more reactive than proactive. That was the biggest challenge. And I think there's starting to be a shift, because it's so rampant now, that people are realizing that there's steps that are needing to take place. And just talk a little bit about, what do you see as one of, or doesn't have to be the biggest, one of the bigger threats to both residential consumers and business when it comes to cyber threats?
I think that's a good lead into the fact that, in the last 20 years, I've been doing incident response or cyber attacks. I'll look at maybe the entry, which could have been an email or something like that.
It's the reactive state, not the proactive state. That's what you're getting sucked into. Yeah.
Correct. And the emails that people would react to were pretty bad. Like the grammar, there's a lot of red flags, right? Maybe even 15, 20 red flags. And now through the tools, whether it's ChatGPT or Grammarly or any kind of artificial intelligence, the attackers have tools to make there be less red flags. So now when I'm looking at, okay, where did this malware come from, and I find the email it was clicked on, it almost has 0 red flags. Like you just talked about, it's got just your initial in there, just a tiny little thing that if somebody didn't know or weren't paying attention. So when people are in a rush, maybe they're on their mobile phone or, just not sitting at their computer, they kind of overlook that tiny detail. And that to me is probably the biggest thing that we're seeing, is the sophistication of the phishing and social engineering is enhanced significantly in the last year or two.
I mean, people are the biggest culprits and the biggest problem. It's the people that are allowing the outside bad actors in, essentially. It's not that they're hacking through firewalls necessarily and stuff like that. It's someone's allowing them in, right? So it's that training and all that. And that's what we try to get across to even our AV technicians, is the importance of password protecting our gear so that no one can hack into our client's network, essentially, right? Or, not necessarily that a client of ours is going to, they could click a button and let them into the network, but they don't want to log into our gear. They don't want to see the default username and password and use that as a route in. There's just so much out there. I know that there's another scam that was not even really cybersecurity related, but you'll get an email. We talk about these emails going out. I had some technicians get an email. This was back when I was at IS, and said, "Hey, it's me. I got to get this thing for these clients. I need you to go run to Best Buy and pick up $400 gift cards, right? And then just send me the numbers on them as soon as you have it, right?" And the technician went to Best Buy, swiped his credit card to buy these gift cards. Fortunately, it was actually over his limit at the time because he had booked a bunch of hotels and stuff. So then called purchasing to say, "Hey, I need you to up my credit card limit. Jeremy needs these gift cards right away." She's standing right outside my desk and is like, "That doesn't sound right." And told me, I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Right. And it turns out it was this whole thing. The email looked like it came from me directly to him. And it was just so unbelievable. And I mean, even if he had something to click on there, he could have clicked on to buy a gift card or whatever it was. Right. Thankfully he didn't, and no one got into our network. But I mean, sometimes it's physical stuff like that. That's the trap. And how all that ties together is just mind blowing. It just, some of the numbers I see, and you might know the numbers better than I do, but the numbers that I see or I hear about, and I'm not even going to try to attempt to recreate or talk about what they were, but they're staggering. The amount of cyber attacks that are happening are staggering. The amount of dollars that are spent in ransomware is mind blowing. Even my own kid's school got sucked into a ransomware thing where they just ended up they didn't pay it. They ended up wiping everything. They had to start from scratch with a bunch of stuff. Fortunately, they had backups available, which, talk about having the data centers and backups and all that other stuff, right? That's completely isolated so that you don't necessarily have to pay ransomware or whatever comes and deals with that. But just seeing that happen more and more, and it's not just the Fortune 100s of the world, it's the average mom and pop company that could have 5 to 30 employees that I think are getting hit more than anybody. Would you agree?
Would. And the average ransomware payment per IBM data breach report last year was $800,000, but total cost of the breach because of having to repair and recover is up to $4 million. That's the average, right? So the thing that we're noticing though is that a lot of companies who do get hacked, if they pay the ransom, it might not be reported. So we're seeing, even in the local area, a lot of attacks that people are just not aware of. So it's happening more than people even realize, and it's in the news every day. I'd almost say we might be desensitized to it. It's not as
You're right.
Big a news as it was because it happens every day.
Well, like Pat was saying, it's more reactive. It's out of sight, out of mind until it happens to you. But the problem is, this is not like something minor. This is major stuff.
It's
and
a
major
doomsday scenario to you and your family.
Or to your corporation, right? I mean, and we've seen recently, I think the first was a local healthcare system, St. Margaret's up in Spring Valley, right? They were culprit to a cybersecurity attack and a breach, couldn't pay their bills forever, went bankrupt. Now in my hometown, the nearest hospital is 45 minutes away, right? And I think I just read about another one that the hospital that closed. So that might be up to 2 now in the United States. That's serious. I mean, that's a bigger company. It's not like your mom and pop 10-person employee, but I mean, the ramifications of these things happening are just unbelievable.
How often are these individuals found? Would you guess on bigger attacks like that? Not the smaller ones that maybe just affect a small family, but something like that to where it affects the lives of thousands of people.
And that involves the FBI at that. Even at the small level, it starts involving the FBI, Homeland Security, things like that. But
think about if you have a family member in that community that now has to, the extra anxiety that comes with knowing that they have to go 45 minutes. The toll on the people is astonishing. How often are those people found?
The problem in cyber compared to even just the physical world is that attribution. It's hard to know who did it, right? So a lot of threat actors, they'll even get on their networking gear, go around the world a couple 100,000 times, pop out of a third world country and attack you. So really knowing who did it is difficult. Obviously the FBI and a lot of organizations have done work and they've caught people, but it pretty much just prevents them from ever traveling, right? So they stay in their safe havens and continue to operate. So a very, very small percent of people ever see any kind of justice.
Do you see that changing over the years as intelligence changes?
I don't. Honestly, with the sophistication of the tools, it's going to get worse because now, if I think back 15, 20 years ago when you're eating Cheetos, excuse me, drinking Mountain Dew in your mom's basement and you're learning how to hack, it took a lot of time to figure out the code. Now there's tools that you can install. I can get both of you hacking in the next 20 minutes from your iPhone, and it's easier now than it was even 3 years ago. So it puts cyber offensive tools inside of just criminals' hands that weren't computer savvy, but they're criminals. So I think it's just going to get worse.
So at this point, the only chance any of us have is defense. There's no ending it. It's here forever. Now, how do you defend it forever?
100% of reality you got to live in.
Well, that's why I'm excited about what we offer at our organization, right? Because we take those tools, apply them to all of our departments across the board, and I think it's going to set us apart, and I think puts us ahead of the curve with most companies. And there's cybersecurity companies out there, and that's what we specialize in. But it's nice to see that work its way into the other divisions of such an archaic AV world that is out there, right? Because it really is archaic. It's still, to some point, I see people out there selling AV that are still in, rock and roll t-shirts, ponytails, fanny packs, and flip-flops, right? We all know that person, right? And so
your mom's basement comment, and there you guys are painting some pretty good pictures and
visuals
for me over here today.
I was thinking about clicking on stuff. I got a fun one. The wife was with her daughter at Dairy Queen in a local town. I'm not going to say which one. Maybe I should even say Dairy Queen, a restaurant. Too late now. So anyways, they had a thing at the drive-through window and the pay window where, scan this QR code and receive like a free Frosty, whatever it was, right? Like a free ice cream or something like that. Get a coupon. Scans the code. it instantly takes her to an adult website, starts playing videos like loudly through the car, like speakers, freaking out. Like she's freaking out. Like, what is going on right now? It tells the lady in the drive-through that this happens. Is freaking out. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I got to see this. 3 days later, I go back thinking, like, I go by, I'm driving past this restaurant. I'm like, I wonder if it's still there. She told them about it. I pull up, it's still there. I'm like, I didn't click on it, but the coupon code was still there. So I'm just assuming it's the right, it's the same one. But how do they not go and take that down? But that's I laugh now whenever I see QR codes, because it scares me. Because what if you click on something, then it installs something on my phone, right? But QR codes, everybody was using QR codes for the past couple of years to donate here or do this. I remember a Super Bowl ad last year or the year before that came up that all it was a giant QR code on your screen. Now, granted, I don't think any hackers are going to pay $2 million to put a 15-second Super Bowl ad up with a QR code, but there are safe QR codes. But how do you know? I mean, you're at a restaurant. I mean, you would think it's for a free ice cream cone or whatever it was. You don't know, man. And so, like, I get so nervous about scanning any of that stuff anymore.
Well, and to your point too, it might have been a legitimate one that somebody then put a sticker over it, so it was in the right placement, and then they might have peeled back the bad one.
And most likely in that case, some high school kid messing around or something. You know what I mean? Who knows what it was? I don't think there's any hacks happening there. But
yeah, unfortunately, since you're still active, we can't get any good stories like we're going to get, maybe 5-10 years down the road. But talk a little bit about your life outside of work and the military. What are your hobbies, family wise? What do you got?
Well, I know you like to golf.
Love
hockey too.
Love to golf.
Did you like the comments I left on the board last week?
What was that?
When we did the reverse feedback.
Oh, yeah.
And this is what we do. So we ask you a question, and then we answer for you.
No, go ahead. No.
I did see that. That was a good one. Yeah, good question. I don't know. I love what I do so much that I don't have a whole lot of life outside of what I do. But yeah, I spend time with the family. Love golfing, love fishing, love hockey. So I pretty much just spend time with the family. And
his son plays for the Peoria Mustangs. So I took my little guy out to watch the game the other night. Now every time we go over by the Owens Center, he freaks out because he sees the bus. Dad, it's the Mustangs. The Mustangs. Had a real good time over there. I know you've had a lot of time, getting him to this point. It's got to be pretty cool to be able to now turn on the webcast on a Friday night and watch him play throughout the Midwest.
Well, and Pat's just getting to that point too, where you and I are at, right? We're kind of, our lives outside of work becomes our kids' sports.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're just getting there, Pat.
Yeah.
Like it's just starting, right? So, I mean, that consumes, I know I never watched a game of soccer in my entire life until a couple of years ago. And now I've been to more soccer games than I ever thought I would be at in my life. So it's crazy. But fishing though, huh? I didn't know you were a fisherman.
Yeah, I grew up in Minnesota, and that was like the only thing.
That makes sense.
While I fish, but yeah, coaching hockey, you didn't get to enjoy it as much. So now, not coaching my oldest boy, I get to sit back and just kind of take it in, and I look forward to it every single weekend.
They sell beers over there at that game. So there's
do they?
Yeah. So Anthony, I see the beer stand. I expect to see him about 2 or 3 deep yelling at the ref, but no such luck.
Oh man, I was on the soccer travel soccer board, right? And man, we had to deal with so many irate parents. Parents are terrible when it comes to kids sports, especially competitive kids sports. Like, so if I can't even imagine selling beer at these events, I'd be like, oh man, we're gonna have to arrest this guy again.
I was shocked when I walked in there and saw that. We're Friday night skating and Bud Lights here. Here we go.
That's awesome. So other than don't click on stuff, what's the best advice you can give anybody watching or listening to the podcast when it comes to making sure your stuff doesn't get hacked?
So for a company specifically, they don't have an unlimited budget, just like we don't have an unlimited budget. So getting a good assessment done just to know your vulnerabilities, know your risk, know your exposure, and then coming up with a roadmap and a plan from there is the most important. I mean, you can't just throw money at it. You can't throw technology at it. You got to understand kind of where you're at, what you're working with. So getting some type of an assessment from a professional. I know some people are actually giving those assessments away for free. I highly recommend not doing that. Kind of be like a free surgery. You
get what you pay for.
Get what you pay for, right? And it could take a couple days. It's something you really need to take serious. So get a risk assessment. And then for your average consumer and, just personal use, having a good endpoint protection, they've gone away from, antivirus as we know it's called endpoint detection and response, but pay for that extra software. And then we talked about password managers too. So using a good password manager so you don't know what your passwords are. That's a pretty good feeling, not knowing what they are because they're so complex that you just use the tools.
I shared my Netflix password with my brother, and I just sent him a screenshot of what the password was from my app, and he goes, "What kind of what is that? What is this for a password?" Like he had to enter it 4 times because he kept reading it wrong, and Netflix finally shut him down because they're starting to crack down on that. But it's people laugh at me whenever I tell them I don't know my passwords.
Every now and then you won't be able to use the tool to enter it automatically, and you'll have to do it manual, and you're like, this is terrible. This is 23 characters.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an I or an L, but
there's a few times I've had to actually open it up because it wouldn't let me. For some reason, I couldn't copy or paste it, or it just wasn't automatically doing it. It was very annoying, but I was like, you know what, I'll deal with it.
Yeah.
The last question you asked, I mean, it's almost an unanswerable question because of the layers that go to cybersecurity. And this is something that I remember from, learning about the ins and outs when I was on the sales side there. If you have, let's say you have your password manager in place, great, that's a great tip, but that doesn't make up for clicking on a bad link. There's just so many different avenues that if you don't have every layer fortified, there's a tiny little hole in, you're done.
Well, this is the reality that we live in now, right? This is why I wanted to make this podcast happen, because it's an important reality that's here to stay forever, right? We just this is life. We have to deal with it. My mom refuses to do online banking because she's so terrified of it, right? Or I haven't written a check and I can't remember when, right? And everything I do is online. So you just have to be careful. Again, it's part of our everyday life now, and we just have to learn how to deal with it and take the best advice we can from guys like you to try and make it, better.
The calls that come in where just a general consumer will call in and say, hey, I clicked on this thing, my computer's acting funny, what can I do? And unfortunately, we don't really do much on the residential side. We'll point them in a direction to maybe people that can help. But it is so frequent now that I'm getting calls asking, for our help there. And I have a feeling that's only going to continue to rise as the years go on.
I hate seeing, people call us and strictly for incident response, not, knowing that they didn't work with us before to try and prevent what was happening. That even outsider looking in, I'm like, oh man, that sucks. Like just having to deal with any of that kind of stuff.
It's unfortunate, but it's kind of like insurance. Like if I'm paying for health insurance and I'm looking at a PPO versus HMO, or I don't even know what I'm looking at, right? So I think they have a hard time kind of quantifying what is the risk, what is the cost and return on their investment, and they just struggle with it.
Well, let's touch on that for just a brief second, because I hear radio ads for all kinds of companies that do cybersecurity, and they talk about compliance with cybersecurity insurance. Right? Insurance is offered for pretty much everything out there, right? But are we seeing claims be denied because they don't have certain things in place? Are we seeing insurance claims, obviously are probably on the rise, but what's happening in that world that you know of?
So obviously we have the sister company, Pearl Insurance, so we're pretty intimate with this topic, and we published a white paper, and we look at insurance, and we call insurance and attacks right of boom. So after there's attack, it's right of boom. And then we call cyber assurance anything you do proactively. We call that left of boom. So a lot of insurance companies have denied claims because of things that were not done proactively, whether they had MFA, but they only had it in a small place. They didn't have it attached to everything. So your insurance claim could get denied. It's important to know what your coverage is. The coverage is changing almost every year just because the premiums have risen so much in the last couple of years. But it's so frequent that they had to do something. They were paying out so much money to people who had insurance that they had to do something about it. So very volatile field in industry, but it's important to know what's covered, how to process your claim when it happens. But then also from an assurance standpoint, make sure you have good cyber hygiene. You're doing everything that you need to be doing to prevent that attack.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all I got. It's a great episode. I'm glad we could talk about a lot of the cybersecurity stuff. Anything you want to add before we jump off?
I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that when I met Jeremy, probably 2.5 years ago, we just got done with orientation. We were at.
Oh, here it comes. I know it's coming now.
And I didn't even know your name, Jeremy. I walked around and he's sitting right next to me, and we get to talking. I think I introduced myself, and then Jeremy's telling me, he does AV, and I'm saying I do cybersecurity, and we legitimately argued about what was cooler, audiovisual or cybersecurity. And I thought you were joking. I'm like, there's no way, man. Cybersecurity is so much cooler. But to this day, we still argue. I've come a long way. I've learned a lot about AV. It is very cool.
And I too have learned a lot about cybersecurity, but I'm still going to make the argument that AV is way cooler than cybersecurity.
Just no national wars done by AV, right? But cybersecurity, you got some.
Okay, there we go.
No, it's good stuff. I've appreciated the time, so thanks.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Catch you later.
Thanks.
Thanks all.